Hello, welcome to this Blender tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to be having a look at Loop Tools, which is a free add-on that comes with Blender but isn't activated by default. So we need to activate it first. So we go to Edit and Preferences, and then in the add-ons section, if I type Loop up here, I'll get Mesh and Loop Tools. So let's select that one and then close the dialog. Now, I need to be in edit mode for this, so I'm going to press Tab. And now we can access our loop tools in a couple of ways. We can select something and right click, and at the top we'll have our loop tools options. And we can also see it over in the N menu. So if I press N and come down to edit, we can see loop tools. And now I've got a list of all of our loop tools that we can use. Okay, so in the next few sections I'm going to go through and just show a use case and how they work. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so our first tool is Bridge. And what I want to do is make kind of an hourglass figure out of this, like an egg timer. So what I'm going to do first is go into the front view, so I can select, and then Alt Z, so I can select through the mesh in ghost mode. So now I'm just going to left click and drag select to select some facing pieces. Alt Z to go back into normal mode. And now right click, loop tools and bridge. So down here we have a few options. You might find that it's closed, but click to open it. So first thing I want to do is add some segments. So let's just count those up there. There we go. So that will add in a curve, and that's because we're in a cubic option here. If I go to linear, it will simply go straight. There we go. We also have a strength option where I can increase or even decrease the strength. If I go negative, it's going to bulge outwards. And, the more positive I go, the more of a curve I'm going to get. At which point you might find that that's not enough options or not enough segments, so you can increase the segments as appropriate. So that is the bridge tool. Next we'll have a look at the circle tool. Okay, so the circle tool will take angled geometry, so like a square of polygons, and convert it into a circle. So for that I've just got this little flat thing here which I've beveled the edges off, and I'm just going to put some cuts in. So let's cut there, and I'll have, let's say, 4 cuts, and then same in the opposite direction for 4 cuts. There we go. Right, now let's just select our polygons. So I'm still in the cut mode. I'm going to press W to go into select mode, and then I'm going to select my internal polygons here. Now I'm just going to inset these a little bit because I like to have a little edge loop around my square, and then we're going to turn this into a circle simply by right clicking, go to our loop tools and click circle, and now we have circular geometry inside our piece. So we have some options down here. We can change from best fit to inside fit. We can tick or untick flatten. We have a radius we can set, so I can control how far that's going away. And we have a regular option. Now this regular option is kind of making the geometry a little bit better, but there's not really enough geometry to form a circle out of that. And we also have an angle here which will change the angle that it's working at, so you can adjust that to straighten up your geometry if you wish. Okay, so why would you want to do this? Well, we now have a circle in a flat plane, and we can use our extrude here to bring that up. And now we've got perhaps a pipe going into a flat plate. I personally would bevel off down the bottom here. That's why one of the reasons I do the inset, because this will be nice and neat now. So Control B, whoops, that's not Control, that is, there we go. And at the top, I would probably inset that and then bevel that as well. So inset, and then, whoops, I'll click the outside, whoops, not the inside, the outside, and then I can Control B, bevel that. Whoops. My fine motor control obviously isn't working well today. So that's the circle tool. And we'll have a look at the next one in the next section. Talk to you then. Okay, so the curve tool is very handy. We can use it to turn a line of polygons, or line of vertices rather, into a curve. So to do that, what we need to do is kind of define the curve, and that, we do that by moving points. So if I select the top and the bottom point here, and I'm just going to use G for move and Y in the Y-axis to move those up there. I want now to create a curve between those 2 points. Now, if I do it with just these 2 points selected, let me right click and go Loop Tools Curve. It's going to make a straight line. What I need to do is kind of define the bottom of the curve. So those two selected, if I select this middle one here, and then right click, Loop Tools and Curve, and now we get a lovely curve in there. So we've got some options down here, as we always do. We've got influence, so just how much to apply the curve. We've got cubic and linear. So linear is giving me a much more straight curve when it's not a curve at all. And we've got restrictions and boundaries. Now I haven't really gone into those, so I won't pretend to know what they do. So we could do all sorts of things with this. You don't have to have 3 points selected. If I say grab one there and GY and move that up, now I can select that point as well, right click and curve, and now I get a more compound curve. So depending upon how many vertices you've got, where you select, where you move them, applying the curve will give you a curve between those two pieces, or between your selected vertices. Sorry, stumbling over my words today. Okay, so that's the end of that one, and I'll talk to you in the next section. So next we have the Flatten tool, and as you can see, I've taken our geometry from the previous one and messed it about a bit, and we can flatten this, and we can flatten it in a number of ways. So first of all, in edge mode, I'm just going to select all the edges on there, and then if I press tab, sorry, I don't mean to press tab, if I right click and Loop Tools and Flatten, you'll see it flattens out. Now I've got it on view, so that flattened it according to the view I was on. So if I go into the front view with the 1 key and just select view again, it will reflatten it. So you see it straighten them up according to that view. If I go to the side view and just select view again, it will flatten it according to that view. So that's really handy, but it's not the only option. We can do a best fit, which has given us a nice curve there. Just sort it out. Or we can do via normals, and that's flattened it according to the normals of each of those points, each of those vertices. And that's the Flatten tool. You can, of course, adjust the strength to your liking, and you can even use these lock keys to lock it in X, Y, and Z. So say I didn't want to have it move in Z, I can lock that and it will just go in X and Y. If I just want it in one or the other, lock 2 here, I'm locking Y, and that's doing it's doing something, but not a lot. Let's try it with just the Y. There we go. See it moving there. Okay, so that is the the curve tool. Next, I believe, is GStretch, so we'll talk now. Okay, so GStretch then, it's got a couple of functions really. It will even out geometry, so if I grab these two and say just move them up a bit, and then select the whole loop of edges, there we go. Oh, mixing up my fingers. Now I can use the GStretch option and it will kind of even them out a bit. And there's an influence down here. I have that quite low, so if I put that right up, it will just flatten them out completely. So you can adjust that to, you know, bring some geometry back into kind of sync with your model, as it were. The other use, and I would argue more useful use, is to use it with annotation. So I'm just going to go to the top view and then click the annotation, and then I'm going to draw out a little curve here. So what I'm going to do is click to start and then immediately press shift. Oops, because shift will allow me to smooth my curve out. Didn't do a very good job there. Let's try that again, be a bit more smooth about it. No, I'm just not very good at it. Well, let's do something like that. Okay, so now on the GStretch options, I'm going to come down to use and use annotation. You can use the G pencil, of course, but for the sake of time, I'm going to use annotation. Now, if I go back to some sort of selection mode and then select my loop of edges here and click on GStretch, it will conform it to that annotation line. Of course, it's not perfect here, and I probably don't have enough geometry to do that. So let me just undo and right click and subdivide. Whoops, didn't mean to subdivide that. I meant to subdivide the whole. There we go. And now when I select those and press GStretch, it will conform a little better. But you might have to go a little bit further than that. Subdivide again and select my line and click GStretch and it will click on. So very useful. You could start making blades with this, or complicated little moldings and such like. Very handy. Very impressed with this one. Okay, so what we got next? We have Loft. So I will talk to you in the next section. Okay, so next we have Loft, and this is quite similar to Bridge, but it has some differences. One of the key differences is you can create a path of objects, such as this. So I've just created a whole bunch of circles and arranged them in a bend. And if I go into edit on here, just select everything, right click, loop tools and loft, it will loft it. Now, some of the oddities here is this isn't a live tool. You kind of have to undo it and redo it to get what you want. So for example, if I undo that and change segments to 1 and then hit loft, you'll see I only get one segment between them. 0 seems to be, give it a good guess. So that sort of kind of works out well. Let me undo that again. We have some other options. So remove face is not relevant on this one, will be on this one. And we have loop. So if you have a complete sort of circle of shapes, if you click loop, then it will loop around and connect to the first shape to give you a full, enclosed mesh. So what else have we got? We have cubic and linear. So cubic will give you curved mesh, linear will give you straighter mesh. And we have strength. So let's have a go at the strength. So strength I've got at 0 at the moment. If I put that to 1 and then loft, probably won't see much difference. That's because I've only got one segment on really. Let's put 3 segments in and then loft. And nothing really happening with strength on that one. It's more relevant, I think, to the next example. Let's just put that to 2 and undo. Whoops. And press loft again. And yes, it's not really having an awful lot of effect. Okay, so that's the kind of shape example, but we also have this object here. So if I want to put a bend in this, all I need to do is select my faces, and then using Loft, I'm just going to reset this to defaults now and hit Loft, and we get something like that. For some reason it's going very much straight. That could be because my strength is 0. So let me undo that, put my strength to 1, and then Loft, and then we're getting the curve. So we can go above 1 just to get a slightly different effect. There we go. I think that's perhaps a little bit better. So you can adjust that as you go. Once again, this one I want to remove faces, so my original faces that I selected are removed. Anything else on this one? Well, segments for this might be slightly more important. So 0 was doing a pretty good job, but if I wanted it to be sort of a lower generation, I could go down to say 3, and it will give me 3. The reason I might go lower is because it's much easier for me to adjust this and then subdivide and add geometry later, rather than having lots and lots of loops which I would need to change individually or use soft select to adjust. Okay, so that is the Loft tool. Next we will have a look at Relax. Okay, so Relax then. Relax does what it says, really. It relaxes your mesh, and it has a tendency to work better on much higher resolution meshes. If you try it at a really low resolution, it will just mess things up. Okay, so we could do a part or the whole of the mesh. So if I press A to select the whole mesh, and then right click and go to Loop Tools and Relax, we've got these options down here which we can use. So we've got a linear and a cubic option. We have selection and parallel all, which I will show shortly. That's a good thing about it. Let's go back to selection, and then we have a number of iterations. So it's 1, 3, 5, 10 and 25. Let's go for 3. There we go. So you see that that's really quite relaxed the mesh. It's not perfect, but it's definitely smoothed a few bits and bobs out. Okay, so if you don't want to smooth the whole mesh, all you have to do is select a bit. So let me just undo with Control Z. Now if I want to smooth this little bit bump down here, I'm just going to select a few outside of it, and then we'll right click and Loop Tools and Relax, and you'll see that it relaxes just that area. Now we have selection and we have parallel. If I switch this to parallel, just keep an eye on the vertices and the mesh in these directions. So if I switch that over to parallel all, you should see that it's actually, whoops, let me undo that. Right click, Loop Tools and Relax, there we go, and in parallel all you should see that it loosens up or applies a certain level of smoothing across these lines. So where I've selected there, essentially everything in this direction is also kind of included, and everything in this direction. If I increase this to a crazy number, you should start seeing, well, this goes nuts, but up here we definitely had a change. So if I do Control Z, you'll see that in this direction it smoothed out the mesh in that direction. On those parallel lines essentially. So let's right click, loop and relax. There we go. 25 is too much, of course. 1 is a good number. The higher the mesh, or the higher geometry count in the mesh, the higher you go in iterations essentially. This one, you know, one is perhaps as much as I could get away with without it going completely mad. Okay, so that's a bit of relax, and we'll have a look at space, which is the next and last tool. So I'll talk to you then. Lastly then, we have space, and space will, you know, work to even out some geometry. So if we select a few points here, so these points here don't seem to be quite right to me, and that one there, I can use the space tool to activate it. So you can see that they spread out, and if I untick X and Y there, it's flattened them out and spaced them quite nicely. So actually X and Y is not making any difference there whatsoever. I perhaps need a larger selection for that. Okay, so we have cubic and linear, and we have selection and selection parallel. So selection parallel will affect anything selected on those loops essentially. Okay, so that goes all the way around and starts to even it out, but it's not like a full even. So let's select more than one. I've found this to be a little bit, how can I put it, ticky. So let's have a go at that. So let's go to space, and let's space those out. Let me pop that back to selection. And yeah, it's kind of worked, but kind of not. It's not really kind of leveling and spacing. I can turn off various axes. If I turn them all off, you'll see what it was in the first place, and only Z appears to be doing anything on there, which I'm not very surprised about. And if we switch to parallel, you should see some other vertices moving there. Let's switch back to selection. Okay, so this is very handy for relaxing or, you know, evening out geometry. Let me do a quick selection over there. Let's do a bigger selection. Let's deselect that one. What's going on? My deselection skills seem to have lost me. Okay, so let's space those out. You'll see it's kind of evened up the spacing. I'm on linear. Let's go to cubic. That's changed it ever so slightly, not in its favour. And then let's go to parallel. And parallel has really messed it up now. So just be careful what options you're choosing, because they can have some, you know, disastrous effects. Okay, so if your geometry is messed up, you know, you want to even it up a bit, you want to get it more back into, you know, a more tidy pattern, then space can be, you know, can be the tool for you. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, please ask me below as usual, and I will talk to you soon.